Big time main event, holy smokes. UFC 259 for the light heavyweight belt. We have the champ and the new champ, Jan Blachowicz, representing Poland with that Polish power, taking on Nigeria and New Zealand's own Israel Adesanya, the last stylebender. The guy is arguably the biggest star in the sport. We are just witnessing greatness here. At Craig Allen FNP on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me there at Matt Allen FNP on those same social channels. And we're looking forward to this fight for a few different reasons. Question mark kicks before the prelims. It's always 2 hours before. We get to offer up our final picks and predictions. Maybe somebody missed weight. Maybe somebody had a bad weight cut or a bad week in general. You get an opportunity to recap everything. And if we're changing...
Did you have a good week?
If we're changing our minds, we'll see what happens there. But we also have the pay-per-view fight companion here on the channel. Look for those links to drop later on in the week. But Matt, our featured fight at 205 pounds... And that's the thing. We have Jan Blachowicz, a career guy. He's had some fights at heavyweight. He's fought at light heavyweight. Big guy for the division, taking on the man moving up, who's 20-0, just beat Paulo Costa. And he just said today with ESPN and with Ariel Helwani that he's going to weigh in maybe around 193 pounds. Don't think that bodes well for him. He's had kickboxing fights kind of all over the map. Had one that was at heavyweight in the past. He's fought big kickboxing names too over with Glory. I know you're going to mention some of them later on, but if you look at Israel Adesanya, he is buzzed through a level of competition that's absolutely insane. I know the fight against Yoel Romero might not have been the best fight, but it's still a big name, and he defended takedowns from one of the best wrestlers that we've ever seen at middleweight. So kudos to Israel Adesanya. You've come a long way since you beat Rob Wilkinson in your debut. All sorts of performance bonuses for him. I mean, 9 total fights in the UFC, 7 bonuses, 5 performance, 2 fight of the nights. Kelvin Gastelum, where you at, bud? And for Jan Blachowicz, 6 bonuses so far, 5 performance, 1 fight of the night. He had a rough start, and he hasn't looked back ever since. The 5 on in, 4-1. The 1 loss, it's a tricky one. We're talking about Thiago Santos 2 years ago, but since then, Luke Rockhold, Jacare Souza, Corey Anderson, Bellator Zone, and Dominick Reyes' last time out. Man, has Jan Blachowicz looked good.
He's a great example of a fighter who just never really gave up on themselves. And I know I'm going to sound a little Robin Blackie, but let's be honest, Jan Blachowicz, his career trajectory is a lot closer to a Michael Bisping than it is to an Israel Adesanya. Like, he's paid his dues. He's won, he's lost, and he's always come back better. And that's the great thing about Jan Blachowicz. If you beat him, you're not going to be able to beat him the same way again. He's kind of like Doomsday, the superhero, that way, where even if you kill him, you got to find a new way to do it the next time. Because Blachowicz, I think in that Thiago Santos fight, did learn a very big lesson. And yes, he was on a bit of a run before that, which led him up to that main event, of course, but he went into that fight expecting Santos to be the aggressor. Santos was not the aggressor. Santos drew Blachowicz into his power. Jan Blachowicz paid for that mistake. He goes in wild in that 3rd round. We all remember what happens. Beautiful hook from Santos, ground and pound finish. Jan Blachowicz, his chin is phenomenal. I know Santos knocked him out, but this man eats bricks pretty much in all of his fights, and it doesn't really seem to faze him. Go back and look at the rematch of the Jimmy Manuwa fight. Phenomenal fight, by the way. One of the better fights of that year. He drops Manuwa early on, eats a flush head kick from Jimmy Manuwa in the 2nd round, though, and just kind of keeps on walking forward in that classic Polish power kind of way. I just really like what Jan Blachowicz brings to the cage, because I don't want to say he's the perfected version of an Ally Quinta, but if you're a really good grappler, he's a good enough grappler to get you off of him and force you to become a striker. And if you're a really good striker, he's a good enough grappler to do the opposite to you and take you down.
And if you're Nikita Krylov, he'll just do everything.
Exactly, and that Nikita Krylov fight, for me, I always liked Jan Blachowicz. I gotta be honest, I've sort of been a fan of his just because I like how goofy he is. Like, he's not who you think of as, wow, he's one of like the baddest dudes in the world. He goes, hoo hoo, and he's just real happy all the time. But in that fight, I was like, okay, this is going to be a tough one. You don't really know what you're going to get from Blachowicz. And every time that you think that this guy's going to lose, he keeps on adding a new wrinkle to his game. The Corey Anderson rematch is another example. He always does better the 2nd time around because he learns from his mistakes, and not enough MMA fighters do that. If Sarah McMahon had Jan Blachowicz just mindset, she'd be champion. But the fact that Jan Blachowicz, he's not afraid to go back to the gym and realize what he's not doing well, and he's not afraid to fix what he isn't doing well. Look at the Dominick Reyes fight compared to some of the other fights he's had in the past. Jan used to get a little tentative, especially with his strikes and his kicks, because it's not that his ground game's bad, but off his back, he's not great at getting back up. You can see that in the Gustafsson fight. Gustafsson, who himself isn't the best grappler, but he was able to just really pound away at Jan Blachowicz from inside of his guard. Blachowicz had mentioned, even in the Jacare fight, I was so worried about the takedown. I didn't really want to get taken down. I know I'm a good grappler, but against a guy like Jacare, you really got to be tentative. Against Dominick Reyes, I don't know if finally the belt was for the line, like the stakes were high enough for Jan Blachowicz to really let everything go, but He looked phenomenal, and he looked great in every aspect of MMA. He let his kicks go. He let his hands go. He was sound defensively. He just showed you everything that you really want to see from a title-winning performance.
And if you look at Jan Blachowicz, and I thought, like, this was the black ace, like, I knew something that nobody else did. He's been training with boxing star and KSW heavyweight Izu Ugono, who's 1-0 in MMA, just had that big win with KSW last year. 18-2 in boxing, and he had a big fight against Dominick Brazil that, well, he lost, and it'll happen. But he's a great guy to try and get your striking ready for a fight with Dominick Reyes, for a fight like Israel Adesanya, to get ready for these strikers. If you look at Jan Blachowicz for part and parcel what he's worth, good grappling, good defensive wrestling, he can be offensive if he needs to, really high stance, really heavy on his legs. He throws nice kicks. You saw that in the fight against Reyes where he just kept hammering away and it looked disgusting, and then he finishes him with his hands. With Israel Adesanya, it's going to be really difficult to try and get at him. And that's the thing, because Adesanya has such a good idea of range. He really gets himself out there early and figures it out. And the one thing that I worried about in the Paulo Costa fight, it's the same thing with Blachowicz. When's Costa going to be able to close distance, start to land on Adesanya? We've seen him, Adesanya, backed up against the cage. If Costa gets you back there, you're in trouble. Yoel Romero was in trouble when he fought him. So you worried about it. Adesanya comes in, and I'm not being a hipster. We can all talk about it. The pec thing. I saw it as soon as Adesanya started to walk into the cage. I thought, well, that's not good. Like, did he... I thought it was torn, right? So I figure if you've got a torn pec, you're not going to be throwing that hand. It's going to hurt.
You sent me so many texts about this.
I did. It was real.
No.
It wasn't like, oh, man, I got on this after. So I figured, okay, this isn't good. And then Adesanya goes out there and he just starts kicking. He doesn't start throwing punches. And I thought, oh boy, this is bad. Like, Costa's going to be able to just crash in and hit him. What happens? Adesanya's such a good kicker. He just kick. And then really in the end of it, you're hammering away. But it wasn't like Alexander Semin when he was in the NHL, just kind of raining punches and he was in pain. It was fine. So for me, do I worry about the gyno a little bit? Maybe, but I don't place as much emphasis on it as I did before. And when it really comes down to it, Jan Blachowicz, so well-rounded, such a big guy in this division too. I mean, he's going to be shorter, he's giving up reach, but thickness is a real thing, and it affects people at light heavyweight.
Can't teach thickness.
You can't teach thickness. You can't teach height either. So it's a tricky fight. I am eager to see if Adesanya was just joking and he actually comes in at like 204. Because we've seen him at 183 before. We haven't seen a light heavyweight move up from middleweight and weigh in light since
Dan Henderson against Daniel Cormier. And that was a weird performance because Daniel Cormier is as big of a light heavyweight as you could possibly get. And he was basically fighting a middleweight. And what was the result of that fight? I mean, there's a picture there that you guys can't see, but some of the greatest highlights really of DC's career. I do expect Adesanya to come up light, and you would say that it's a negative, but I actually look at it completely different. If you're fighting a wrestler, yes, it would be a negative because they would have the weight advantage and they can wear on you. I don't think Jan Blachowicz is going to shoot a lot of takedowns in this fight. I really don't. I think he might get into trouble and panic wrestle, but when you're panic wrestling, it's not like that was a part of your game plan going into it. It's like, oh shit, I'm kind of stunned. This is what I'm going to go for. For Adesanya, the feints that he does use, and that was the big thing for Costa. I know Costa said 1 bottle of wine, 2 bottles of wine, then you show up to a title fight hungover. But Adesanya just froze him because he constantly made Paulo Costa think he was going to strike. If you look at the way Adesanya moves, you're like, oh, that's a professional athlete. Then you look at the way Jan Blachowicz moves, and you're like, damn, that man needs a massage. But they're both equally effective, and that's why MMA is such a wild and crazy sport, because although they are both primary strikers, and I would say similar levels of success. I understand Adesanya's the favorite. He's the one moving up, but you don't become champion by accident. It's just the way in which they do strike is so polar opposite.
For Jan Blachowicz, he just had a birthday. Happy birthday, Jan Blachowicz. Just turned 38. Just had a child, or his wife did. So congrats to him, or fiance. You see them on the countdown. So congrats to Jan Blachowicz. For Israel Adesanya, he does weird stuff in videos with his dogs, and now he's in a big fight. And this is the biggest fight of his life. And again, I've long considered, and that's weird to say because he's only had 9 fights in the UFC, this guy's your superstar. Like, this is the next John Jones. This is the next George St. Pierre. This is your guy right here at the Last Stylebender. So whether you like him or not, he's going to be around for a long time. And even if he loses this fight, he still has a belt at 185 pounds.
Oh, 100%. And the wild thing about Adesanya, too, is it's not like the UFC fed him a lot of easy opponents. Like, you don't knock out Robert Whittaker, beat Yoel Romero, and beat Paulo Costa the way that he did without having the hype be justified. Like, I think at this point, it is fair to say, like, Stylebender is what you think he is. He is the best striker in the UFC. UFC, whether you want to admit that or not. He's the most dynamic guy. He can strike from both stances. Like, we've never seen a striker like this in MMA before. And that's just the truth. And people want to say, well, Anderson Silva or whatever. Silva, for his time, yes, he was very much ahead of it. Israel Adesanya, it's like he's the next evolution of what basketball is. Like, basketball went from post play to 3-pointers. Who knows what's going to be next? Well, right now, Adesanya...
Half-court shots.
Exactly. Adesanya's shooting threes from the logo, and Jan Blachowicz is still very much kind of that regular modern version of a fighter. He just does everything fairly well, and I do think you're going to have to be that wrestling specialist to beat Adesanya. That's not much of a hot take, and people are going to say, oh, well, he fought Yoel and he beat him. Yoel barely wrestled in that fight. I really do think he's going to have to fight one of those pressure wrestlers where that's going to be his only game plan, and he's not going to play the striking game at all. Because if you're a striker, even if you're a great striker like Robert Whittaker, who's a 9.999 out of 10 in striking, well, Adesanya's that 10, and unless you are on his level, which not many people in the world are, you're going to have a very hard time trying to strike with him, even in MMA. And last point for me on Adesanya, he's not just a kickboxer. He is an MMA kickboxer now. He has the takedown defense. He has the cardio. He has some of the grappling now to where it's not as easy as, oh, I can just go take him down and I can beat him. You need more than that. Jan Blachowicz is extremely well-rounded, and I think you're going to need a fighter like him to beat Adesanya. I just think at the age of 38, being a little bit slower like Blachowicz is, he does rely on his power a little bit, let's be honest. He has great technique, but he's not the fastest guy in the world. It's going to be really hard to knock out Adesanya if you can't hit him. And between his truck movement and his footwork, it's going to be really hard for Blachowicz to land. And if Adesanya is just feint, you can draw out big reactions from Jan Blachowicz. The fact that he has gotten to a title by reacting like that to feints is somewhat surprising, but I do think that just speaks to how good Jan Blachowicz must be.
And the other interesting point about these two guys, because again, Jan Blachowicz didn't get here by accident, but he's the type of guy that he can follow you and he moves in a straight line. He reminds me of a friend that I had growing up that had a man's body in grade 7 and was a competitive hockey player until everybody figured him out because he could only go in a straight line and he couldn't stop and he couldn't turn. So Jan Blachowicz, very much like my friend, for Israel Adesanya, again, he is that next evolution. If Jan Blachowicz is like Shane Battier, well then Israel Adesanya is like John Collins. So you can look at it that way. Now I like John Collins and I don't love the Hawks, but for Israel Adesanya, the next evolution, I think the side-to-side movement is really going to help him out in this fight. I do like Adesanya, so let's have a look at the Tapology votes where it gets interesting, Matt. 65% of 1,500 on the dot have Adesanya to win. Majority have him to win by knockout. 61% for the 35% that have Blachowicz. 78% have him to win by knockout. If we look at the odds, Blachowicz open a plus 210. He's now at a plus 189. And for Adesanya, open minus 250. He's now minus 235. The people have Adesanya. Matt, do you have Adesanya?
I have a question for you, then I'll give my prediction.
Is it a basketball question?
No, it's MMA. Okay. How many takedowns does Jan Blachowicz attempt in this fight? Does he attempt more or less than 5?
3.
3, okay. I think he needs more of that if he's going to win this fight. If he doesn't shoot at least 5 takedowns, I don't know how he beats Israel Adesanya.
Do you think training primarily with Izu Ogono helps out with your takedowns?
No, but I think the black belt in jiu-jitsu probably does. And the fact that Jan Blachowicz has a lot of fights that I can go back and watch. And he is a great grappler. It's just weird. He doesn't have athleticism. Jan Blachowicz, he's just slow. He's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big Jan Blachowicz guy. He just, you don't look at him and think like, wow, that's one of the baddest fighters in the world. Like, he doesn't move like you would really expect.
Well, if you listen to his rope story, he is.
If you listen to the rope story, one of the more intense stories out there. I doubt Adesanya has anything close to that.
They put that in embedded.
The man wears a wristband.
Anyway.
Okay. I think Adesanya's going to win. Not only do I think he's going to win, I think he's going to win by question mark kick. And the only reason I'm confident about that, and I know, I don't say this often where I give the method, but lately I've been doing okay with it, so I feel somewhat confident.
It's the name of one of our shows.
Anyways. Jan Blachowicz bites on feints, and he does drop that right hand quite a bit. My issue is Adesanya throws a ton of question mark kicks. Just look back at the Paulo Costa fight. That's how he set up the finish. Was Costa was leaning, it set up the question mark kick after he'd invested so heavily in the leg kicks. Well, Jan Blachowicz isn't the fastest guy in the world. Adesanya, he's not Usain Bolt, but in MMA, he's one of the faster guys around. So if he is able to chop down at that leg, get the right hand of Blachowicz to drop by feinting the jab, it's just going to set up one of those beautiful question mark kicks. And will it put him away? Maybe not, but that technique will land, and it's going to land hard throughout this fight. I expect Adesanya to win, and that's when it gets interesting. Does he stay at 205? Does he call out John Jones? Does he try to fight Stipe? Like, who really knows what Adesanya's going to do next? You just know that there's going to be a lot of eyes attached to it.
Matt, I'm really looking forward to the fight, and I'm in agreement with you as well. Both of us going with Nigeria and New Zealand's own Israel Adesanya to win the title, to become the double champ. And if we get it wrong, we're donkeys, but I'm really looking forward to this fight. And Jan Blachowicz, credit where credit's due, multiple paths to victory, and if he wants to grapple, that's where it gets interesting. So I'm really looking forward to it. We both have Adesanya. We're really looking forward to it. This is a great card, and if this is the first time you're tuned in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, the loser from last weekend has to take a shot of Poirier's Louisiana-style hot sauce from Dustin Poirier and the Heartbeat Hot Sauce Company up here in Canada. Now, no, it's not a sponsor like Manscaped is. And yes, I really actually like the taste of this.
Good.
Don't want to shoot it and lose it, but Matt, let's do it. Let's get in the camera. Here we go.
Wow, guys. Craig, how excited are you right now? Be honest.
I'm not excited at all.
That's unfortunate.
All right, we're going to fill it up to...
Oh, goodness. Yeah, he's getting a good amount there, folks. All right.
All right, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Bottoms up.
Chunky.
Oh, boy.
All right.
That's a commitment for you. Fight Night Picks. Fight Night Picks on Instagram, Twitter. Matt, as we always say, with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.